Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat learning session with TBA Rabbinic Intern Chayva Lehrman.
We're starting Parshat Vayakhel, and the first 5 sources on this sheet all have one word in common. So the first source here, these are all from this week's Parsha. Chu meitchem truma l'Adonai, kol nediv libo, yevieha et trumat Adonai zahav v'chesef unchoshet. We're talking about take from among you gifts to God. Anyone whose heart is so moved shall bring them gifts for Adonai, gold, silver, and copper. But I will warn you that English is not going to be very helpful for you in answering my first quiz question, which is, what is the word that these all have in common? Next source. V'chol chacham lev bachem yevo'u v'yasu et kol asher tziva Adonai. And let all among you who are skilled come and make all that Adonai has commanded. Yael, can you read the next source for us? We're just going to go through all 5 of them, and then we'll go back and review.
Vayavo'u kol ish asher nesa'o libo, v'chol asher nadva rucho oto, hevi'u et trumat Adonai, limlechet ohel moed, ulechol avodato, ulevigdei hakodesh. Vayavo'u ha'anashim al hanashim, kol nediv lev, hevi'u chach, vanezem v'taba'at v'chumaz, kol kli zahav v'chol ish asher henif tnufat zahav l'Adonai. And everyone who excelled in ability and everyone whose spirit was moved came, bringing to Adonai an offering for the work of the tent of meeting and for all its service and for the sacral vestments. Men and women, all whose hearts moved them, all who would make an elevation offering of gold to Adonai, came bringing brooches, earrings, rings, and pendants, gold objects of all kinds.
Thank you. And can we have a reader for the fourth one? It's written in very fine print here, Exodus 35:29. Or actually, I'll just jump in for this and then we'll get into discussion. So, Kol ish ve'isha asher nadav libam oto lavi lechol hamalacha asher tziva Adonai la'asot b'yad Moshe hevi'u v'nei Yisrael nedava l'Adonai. Thus the Israelites, all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything for the work that Adonai through Moses had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering to Adonai. So we're clearly in this moment of building the Mishkan, and everyone is bringing things. They're bringing their skills and they're bringing their beautiful belongings. Has anyone picked out what the Hebrew word is that's consistent across all of these? Yes. Yavo, yes, that's true. And lev. So nadiv is across some of them, but not all of them. Right. So nadav is in the last one, but yavi is not. Joey, do you mind using the microphone?
Teruma and terumat.
Also a common one, not in all of them, but in many of them. Yep. So we're going to go back to Marshall's point of lev. It's too bad Rabbi Kligfeld's not here when we're speaking about his son's name. But lev is in each of these, right? In the first one, we have it with kol nediv lev yevieha. Everyone this translation says heart is so moved. Nediv means generous, right? So everyone who is generous of heart. But then in the next verse, which is 5 verses later, we're going from Exodus 35:5 to Exodus 35:10. V'chol chacham lev, all among you who are skilled. So chacham lev is of wise heart as literal translation. Then we go back to we say in the next verse, vayavo'u kol ish asher nesa'u libo. Right, so now we have a different usage of lev, right? That he essentially lifted up his heart is the literal translation of this. And the JPS translation is excelled in ability. So we have heart being used in several different, in euphemisms for different things, right? We have skill in 2 different forms, and generosity. And then in the same verse, it also says, asher nadva rucho. So in this case, it's talking about generosity, but instead of saying nadiv lev, generosity of heart, it says nadva rucho, like generosity of his spirit, right? So we have several different versions of heart and spirit, and different ways of saying skill, and different ways of saying generosity. How do you think of heart in American parlance, kind of euphemistically? If we talk about what does the heart service? And Marshall, I see your hand, if we can get the microphone down.
Well, in English parlance, it's thought of as the seat of emotion, but in biblical Hebrew, it's a seat of intelligence, I believe.
Yes, exactly. So we need to make sure that we keep this in mind when we're thinking about generosity, especially when we're talking about Nadiv Lev, right? Because when we're talking about Chacham Lev, that this is the wisdom of the center of the intellect, and that is the way of describing somebody being very skilled in something, it makes sense, right? That Lev would be something for intelligence, skill. They're very good at their craft. But what does it mean to have the center of the intellect be described as the center of generosity, right? Because often we think of generosity as something that comes from the heart in our modern American way of saying it, right? Something that comes from the heart, like emotionally, that we have an open heart and we give freely. So we're not actually going to answer that question right now, but we're going to continue onwards and just hold that question in our minds. All of the ways that people are coming to offer their skills and their belongings, how would you describe the model of generosity? We're skipping down. There's a set of questions on the bottom of the third page, top of the fourth. How would you describe the model of generosity that's being proposed here? The relatively large set of psukim above this question essentially says that people were giving so much that it was too much, and Moses had to say, stop. Like, huge problem at Beth. People are too giving. and so, that God willing, everyone should be blessed with such a problem. So they're giving so much that Moses says, you must stop. How would you describe this model of generosity? Voluntary, okay? Note also the questions on the top of page 4, it got split. Universally applicable or only for Jews? Because we're building the Mishkan here, so what does that mean? And does it matter to which cause one gives? But we'll hold that for a sec. Is this universal or is this Jewish? Sorry, Joel? Not universal.
Nothing to do with other people, so it isn't like the Red Cross that would help anybody if there's a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Why is the Mishkan specific to Jews?
I'm sorry?
Why is the Mishkan specific to Jews?
Because of their relationship to God. And so it says, V'asuli Mishkan v'shachanti b'tocham. They make a Mishkan for me and I will dwell with them. So it has to do with our being close to God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does anyone have a different take on whether the Mishkan is just for Jews or a way of connecting with God is just for Jews? Can we pass the mic back?
But, they just screwed up with the calf, right? So Jewish guilt now looks like it's in operation.
You're all ahead of me and providing all the segues before we get there. So let's jump forward.
But I didn't even shoot and read ahead.
You didn't? Did you really not read
No,
ahead?
I didn't.
Okay, well, wait, leave the mic there and go ahead and read. This next pasuk, or set of psukim, is not from this week's Parsha. It's from the Parsha we read this morning, which now would be last week's Parsha.
We're up to where are we up to?
Aaron said to them, you men take off
Okay.
gold rings.
Aaron said to them, you men, take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me. And all the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. Then he took from them and cast in a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Thank you. Is this a model of generosity? No. Say more. Aaron is demanding of them that they give their gold, right, as in response to the anxiety that they expressed, and taking from them. did God command that the Israelites also give of their own skill and belongings for the Mishkan? No, for the Mishkan?
No.
Did God command, right, that the Mishkan be built of beautiful things from the community? Okay, Alan?
This raises just a very interesting question. If all the gold that they had in their ears and everything else went to the golden calf, what gold was left to go to the Mishkan? And that lays, Ein Mukdam U'Char B'Torah, and some say maybe earlier and what have you, but it's an interesting. Well, it's just the ears and the rings. What other gold? What other gold did they have if they were making what was going to be supposedly their image of God that Aaron was doing? It's amazing. Aaron, the rabbis do everything they can to make Aaron look good, but when you look at the plain shot, it looks like he wasn't so good and get this done.
Aaron didn't say, bring me all your gold.
So Aaron said, only bring me your rings and your gold. Okay, 1 second. Sandra and then Irv. Bring whatever you want. Yeah. Right. So, right. Right, exactly. And that idea that God commanded that the Mishkan be brought and gave instructions, very clear instructions, but then each person brought of their own free will. I'll actually invite you to check back at the pasuk at the bottom of page 2. Thus the Israelites, all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything for the work that Adonai through Moses had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering to Adonai. Right, so it's exactly what you're saying is that it is both commanded and free will. But how do we hold all of that? But Irv, you were going to say something earlier.
That Aaron was making the golden calf as a way of dealing with the people's fears of everything else. So it was really like a diversion of, the idea of having them do something they probably didn't want to do to keep them focused on staying together rather than just saying, oh boy, Moses is gone, we're left here to starve in the desert, right? That's the situation they were in before the golden. The golden calf was, my understanding, Aaron, it was a good thing because it was like a way that kept the people from doing something worse. Didn't they kill her, who was trying to stop them from the mob before the calf?
Yeah, yes. We're going to put that story aside.
I know, so you could straighten it out for me.
What I want to pick out from what you're saying is that Aaron was assuaging the anxiety of the Israelites, right? Like that's how the rabbinic understanding is, that Aaron was kind of stuck and didn't have any good option of what to do in that moment, right? So that what undergirds that comment is that intentionality matters when it comes to generosity, right? That like we don't view this as an act of generosity of the heart, of the soul, of the mind, because it's actually a giving out of anxiety, right? It's a giving out of a negative mental space, and therefore we don't hold that up as a model. Are there any other comments before we move forward to this idea of how guilty they were feeling in this moment? Yes, right. Yeah, so she's saying, do you want the Mishkan to be built from a place of, guilt, anxiety, obligation, or should it should be holier, that it would be built from a place of love and free will and love for God? Yeah. Yes, Fran. And sorry, Joey and then Fran.
Yeah. Well, with the golden calf, that was just beyond simple anxiety or whatever. It's blasphemy. It
is blasphemy. Right. So we have a problem with both intentionality and result, right? Neither means nor end are justified there.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Fran, are you comfortable with the microphone? Okay, great. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. I'm just going to repeat that for the folks on Zoom so they can hear it. So you were saying that some days you feel more generous and some days you feel less generous, and like that's just being human. And it would be a little preposterous to assume or ask that everybody feels maximally generous right when we ask them to, right? And right, miracle of this moment that everyone brings their pure heart. Yes. Yeah, definitely aspirational. Yes, Joel, and then we're going to, Joel and Marshall, and then we'll move on.
As far as I know, in the days of the Torah, there was no internet and no email. And we are in such a different position. We get so many emails asking us for money, and all of these are good causes. There's an earthquake in Turkey, can we help? We have a need in our own synagogue, can we help? There's Jews who are hungry, there's Holocaust. We get 20, 30, 40 emails a week asking us for money, and I'm not even mentioning the political ads asking to support candidates. So it's such a different kind of thing where you had one function there, one thing to give to, and now when you talk about generosity, you have to ask, but to what extent do I give something for everybody? Then I don't have any money left for myself. So it's a much more of a conundrum, I think, today.
Yes. It was, while you pass the mic, I'll just say one of the most powerful experiences of generosity that I've ever received was when I was backpacking the Appalachian Trail, and people would not be asked. They would just come out to trailheads and cook us meals or leave boxes full of sodas or whatever it was. And it's called trail magic. Like, there's a term and a practice of this all along the AT. It was so cool. And it was
Sign me up.
yeah. I mean, it does involve sleeping in the woods for 6 months, but that's a different story. But this idea of when people give without
Chayva,
yes,
you said that. I just have to know, which direction did you go?
I went northbound.
And what months?
I actually, the anniversary of my start date was 4 days ago, March 7th.
Oh, so nice. Because they also, people would let you take showers. People would leave boots in libraries. I mean, I get worked up about the trail, but I'll stop now.
We should talk later. Marshall?
Actually, Baxter and Rosenblatt from the conservative yeshiva sort of answered Alan's question about if they donated all the money for the Mishkan, how do they have enough for the golden calf? And so she mentioned in Sifrei, which is rabbinic commentary on the book of, I guess, Devarim.
No, Sifrei is
Leviticus. Okay, she referenced here Sifrei, but that basically one of the places that Bnei Yisrael were in crossing over was called Di Zahav, enough gold. So they had both money for building the Mishkan and also for Kriya.
That's great. So we're tight on time. Can you say it quickly? Okay. That is a great point, that these people probably would not have had much, and how powerful it must have been to be able to give for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's an interesting conversation on what Avdut meant in Egypt, but it is such an empowering way to enter a relationship with God, right? That you have something to give God, as well as everything that they're receiving from God. Everything that they received is it is compelling. I appreciate that point. So I just want to hold that point that we had earlier around intentionality matters, and where things come from matters. I'm not going to read this full text, but I will invite you to read it later. There's an excerpt from Rabbi Arthur Green's translation of the Sfat Emet on the bottom of page 4, top of page 5, where he talks about how after the sin of the golden calf, they needed to give this offering. And he actually, I would think that this would be a guilt offering, right? That like they're looking to expiate themselves of this horrible, really maximal sin they've just committed. And instead, Rabbi Green says, by the act of giving, they brought forth their own inner generosity, their longing and attachment, so that they were able to draw the Shekhinah into their midst. And that's why the sanctuary is called the Tabernacle of Witness. It bears witness that the Shekhinah dwells in Israel. So this ties actually really well to what you were just saying, that there's that it wasn't coming from a low place where they're not groveling before God. They're actually raising themselves up and saying, like, making themselves worthy of this relationship with God, and making themselves worthy of having a Mishkan of God in their midst. We're running out of time, and I was talking to Alan beforehand about whether or not I had too many sources, and I think this answers the question. But we're going to conclude here. The rabbinic material that follows, if you want to take this home and look through it later, is rabbinic discussion around where generosity sits in the hierarchy of Jewish values, and what does it mean to what are the other ways, in addition to Nadiv Lev, in addition to generosity of heart, that the rabbis describe being a generous person. And in Pirkei Avot, we particularly see them describe it as a good eye. When you see something in Pirkei Avot say that he had a good eye, it means that he had a generous eye. And I love that, because to me, generosity is not just giving kind of wantonly and blindly, but seeing a need and looking to fill it. So there's both the seeing and the intentionality of, there is a role for me here. So I'll invite you to turn to the very last page. This is from Bavli Sota. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, one may give a cup of blessing to recite the blessing of Birkat HaMazon only to someone with a good eye, a generous person. As it's stated, one who has a good eye will be blessed, Yavorach, for he gives of his bread to the poor. But the Gemara says, do not read Yavorach, will be blessed. Rather read will bless, Yavarech. And so someone with a good eye both is receiving blessing and is giving blessing of themselves.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.